Hello and welcome back to Stephencministries. I've got a really incredible episode here for you today. I'm joined by Lamont, who shares his testimony publicly for the first time. He details his experience of the New Age movement, lucid dreaming, and even astral projection, and how that all led him to finding truth ultimately in the person of Jesus Christ. Thanks for watching and enjoy the podcast. Lamont, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. What a lot of people don't realize is usually when I find a guest for the podcast, I've listened to their testimony before online and then I've reached out to them. But with you, we've actually been connected through a mutual friend, Nate, who is in America right now. I grew up with him here in Australia, and I think it's really God's providence that we're speaking right now. So it's a really cool connection to have you on. And yeah, I want to thank you for your willingness because it's not something you've done publicly before. Would share your testimony online on somebody's platform. So I really appreciate you coming on and being willing to do that. And I know for you, your story starts with some early childhood spiritual experiences that I think a lot of people have had, but maybe not to the same extent as you. So perhaps you could kind of take us through that. What kind of stuff was going on for you in your early childhood years?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I definitely feel like it's God's providence how this worked out. And so shout out to Nate. Yeah, so early childhood, as far as I can remember, I'd always had experiences with sleep paralysis, which is not an uncommon thing. And I would constantly find myself in that state where my mind was awake, but my body was asleep. But I'd always sense this dark presence within the room. It would always just freak me out as a kid, and so to the point where it's like I didn't want to go to sleep. I'd like wake up, play the video game, watch TV in order to just keep my mind awake and processing. And so that happened ever since I can remember. Maybe about as early as 5 years old, and yeah, so I grew up with that. I grew up inside of a house that the Bible wasn't unfamiliar. My dad was, would always teach us the Bible. My aunt was huge into the Bible. It was like you did anything wrong, she'd like, throw a Bible at you metaphorically. She's always coming at you with some verses, and she was really honest about that. We went to Sunday school probably for a couple years as a kid, and so it was one of those things that I grew up around it, but I didn't quite understand it. You hear about Jesus died on the cross, but you didn't quite understand what that meant. It's just so you had a
Totally.
bunch of these stories. Yeah. And so grew up just kind of, so I always had this belief that there was something more, that there was some sort of other reality than the one that we were currently experiencing that wasn't unfamiliar to me. But just, of course, as a kid, yeah, you've got a lot going on. And so you're not making any deep theological assessment about that. And I didn't have the Bible to really like say, hey, this is maybe what I'm experiencing. And so, yeah, so that's what I experienced in the childhood, if that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely it does. And so what was the sleep paralysis like for you? Like for people who don't know what that is, what occurred when you would experience sleep paralysis?
Yeah, yeah. So sleep paralysis, if you were to just Google it, it is something that we all actually experience when we go to sleep. We just are normally unconscious to it. It's a certain brainwave state that your mind will hit when you get deep enough into your sleep to where your mind is still a bit awake, but your body is completely asleep. But we normally just slip right through that into a dream state. Sleep paralysis sleep paralysis as we know it, or what I would find myself at, is just being in that state of being conscious and your mind being awake. And I'd be in my bed and just be totally frozen. Like I could not move. I could see around me. I could just see the darkness in the room. And one distinct thing about this state is, for me at least, is I just feel this vibration going through my body, and I could hear this buzzing noise in my ear, and it was just loud, and it seemed like it kept growing and growing. And so that it just scared the living daylights out of me. That just mixed with the darkness in the room, and then you'd also I'd get this sense that there was something else there, just this sort of nasty presence. And so I ended up finding a way to kind of get out of that state. If I could like wiggle one part of my toe or something, like if I could just get one part of my body to flinch really quick, I'd end up waking up out of that state. And so, I just remember running to my dad's room or my mom's room and being like, "Hey, this is what's going on. I don't know what to do about it." And they have the famous clue. My dad's the king of if you give him something, he'll try to make something of it. He's like, "Oh, this is probably what you're experiencing," and it's like, I don't think like that doesn't sound like it. So, uh, Yeah, and so it's not a common thing until actually I found out, a lot of people reporting like, hey, like I'm having sleep paralysis, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. Only to come find out later that sleep paralysis, just being in that state, is the threshold, if you will, of the doorway to getting into what we'll get into here is astral projection. And so, yeah, that was not where I thought that was going to go as a kid, of course. It kind of hinted me in that there was something more to this reality, but it obviously wasn't clear.
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely keen to get into your experiences on astral projection. I think that's something that's really interesting, especially because we grow up with this lie that all we are is a body, right? So when you have people that are leaving their bodies and astral projecting, that's something that really challenges the kind of modern materialist scientific worldview that we've all been raised with. So I'm keen to get into that. Another really interesting experience that you were having as a young person is lucid dreaming. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Like, when did you sort of get interested in that? What is lucid dreaming for people who don't know?
Yeah, yeah. So lucid dreaming, like I said, if you were to Google it, lucid dreaming is essentially just being awake while in a dream, having more consciousness in your dream than you would normally have. And so, and I think we all experience that as well. The last 3 seconds before we wake up, we're pretty conscious. We're like, oh, I'm in a dream. You get kind of freak out, and then you wake yourself up. But the practice of lucid dreaming is there are techniques that you can do to become conscious within your dreams and to fly around in your dreams and be conscious and just kind of experience the excitement of that. And so early on, I think I was about 16. I must have like read a Facebook post or something where it mentioned something about lucid dreaming, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've always who hadn't wanted to be awake in their dreaming, right? And so um, it wasn't any crazy method or anything that I did to employ it. It's that just if you're starting to wake up in your dream, just slow down your breath a bit, and it'll keep you within that state from waking up. And so it was literally like that next night, like right after school. I think I read it on my way home from school, and it was like that next night. I ended up, yeah, doing just that, having a lucid dream experience where, yeah, I became conscious in my dream, slowed down my breath, and behold, I'm within my dream, just flying around, just kind of experiencing what that was like. And that probably lasted for, about 5 or 6 minutes, which felt like a long time. Um, yeah, so that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember as a kid having lucid dream experiences, not even trying to sort of bring them on. And I think that's
Mhm.
something that a fair few people have experienced. I remember once like being in the primary school that I was actually at in a dream, and I just got a new watch. And I remember like trying to figure out what time it was, how much longer I had to experience the lucid dream, and
Mm.
checking my watch and then thinking like actually my watch probably won't reflect what the time is in real life because I'm asleep. Like how am I meant to know? It's like it's pretty amazing the level of awareness that you're having in this dream, the level of thought you're having,
Right.
trying to problem solve all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, but unfortunately for you, like it does for a lot of people, I think, especially when we start to try and make these experiences happen to us, it sort of takes a bit of a darker turn and you start to get involved in like astral projection and some other stuff. And that obviously eventually leads into other occult practices that we were talking about before. But yeah, what did that look like for you? How did you sort of transition from just that childhood interest in lucid dreaming to astral projection?
Yeah. And so that was actually right after I did the lucid dreaming. I was probably the next day, I was like, oh my gosh, that's pretty cool. Let me do some more research about this. And lucid dreaming and astral projection are like this. And they're like they're just very closely aligned with each other. And so I just stumbled onto a page where it talked about astral projection. And it was like, oh, well, you go outside of your body. And so for the folks that don't know, astral projection is having an out of body experience, being able to consciously come out of your physical body into another realm. And I'm like, well, that sounds pretty cool, right? I'm going to try that out. And so it must have been like the next day or within that week that I ended up trying out astral projection. And so I tried it out one time. I didn't know why I was doing it once I started it. I All I remember was getting up from my bed and just looking around the room, and I was like, it's weird. It's daytime. I just went to sleep. And like I opened up my door to go downstairs. I'm like, this is weird. For some reason, everything was silent within there. And it's like, oh, it's kind of odd, but whatever. I just woke up, whatever. And I opened up the door to go outside, and yeah, it's just complete daytime. And I was like, I just went to sleep. Like, did I sleep that quick? I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I walk out to the road in front of my house, and I just remember looking down the road, and things just kind of felt different as I was walking. It was like the gravity was less. Um, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. And I just remember jumping. And I ended up jumping from where I was in this place I'm at in Missouri called 26th Street. I ended up all the way on 2nd Street. So like 26 city blocks plopped down on the other side of Joplin. It's a
Wow.
small town. And I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like around all these buildings with inside Joplin. And I ended up walking inside one of them. And I just remember seeing as what I come to know now, just spirits there that were like congregating and talking with inside this one building. And I just remember waking up. I was like, God, something about this isn't right. And ended up just pulling myself out of it. And so that was my very first experience with it. Like that happened that one night, and I probably just totally forgot about it within the midst of being a teenager and everything else kind of going on. And so years later, now I'm about 19, and I was with a roommate of mine. We had just made a trip out to New Mexico, Jemez Springs, this really nice place out here to go camping. And we went to this little gift shop. And at the gift shop, they had a bunch of like cool rocks and geodes, which me and my dad, when I was younger, would always like to collect geodes and whatnot. They thought the rocks are pretty cool. But then they had crystals there as well. And they're like, oh, this is pretty cool. And we pick up the crystals, and I couldn't remember if it was me or my buddy that had mentioned that they heard from somebody about crystals being this sort of healing thing or having some sort of supernatural substance to it. And that quickly led us to like researching that, which again just kind of I found myself right back to astral projection just in the research. And told my buddy, I was like, hey, I had this experience. Let's both try to do it and see if we can like meet up with inside this world. And so I did. Um, yeah, so we did. We both did. We ended up having these astral projection experiences separate of each other. And for the first few days, it was like, hey, man, we're just kind of talking about it. Like, hey, I had this experience where I flew around the city, or I went like, felt like the other side of the world, and just having like these really interesting experiences that we journaled down. Um, but that was kind of the start of, that was the beginning of the end, if you will, because it took a quick turn from there.
When you were like astral projecting, how could you differentiate between your experience of lucid dreaming, like just being awake in your dream, from actually like leaving your body and astral projecting? How could you kind of tell the difference?
Yeah. So lucid dreaming, as we all know, our dreams are very confusing. They're like an amalgamation, whatever that word is, of sort of
Yeah,
just a lot of things going on at once. And so it was obvious to me, like in that instance when it was a lucid dream. Whereas when you're in an astral projection, it is just very much like this reality that we're in. It's a lot more stable for the most part. Comparatively, it's a lot more stable. Things have a bit more structure to it. Like I said, when I woke up from that first experience, I felt like I was inside of my room, like nothing was
true.
different. And so, yeah, it has a lot more of a stable comparatively. The further you get into it, though, it becomes a lot less stable and a lot more random and radical. But yeah, and also just the methods that you use to get in there. I think so. Both the times that I did it, it was pretty conscious that I did for the most part. Like I was trying to lucid dream, then I was trying to astral project, and so there's just a bit of a different path that you take to get to one or the other, and that was pretty distinguishing for me.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And so, what did it look like for you and your buddy start to get into these practices together, and you're both having success, which is crazy, right? Like he's also having success, and you say that things start to go downhill from there. What do you mean by that? Like, what starts to take place after that?
So, yeah. it must have been, I mean, it happened quick. It must have been like a couple weeks in. I just had this experience of, well, there's two of them, and I'm not sure which one broke the camel's back, but I had this experience of, I can't, and I'm not sure which one was first either, but I remember coming out of my body and I was standing up within my room with inside this other realm. And I just remember falling backwards consciously, and I fell through my wall. And when I turned around falling, I was no longer anywhere in the place that I was. I was no longer around the apartment buildings I was staying at. It was like I was falling from a skyscraper, and I'm just falling down. And I turn around and I look around and I catch myself. I start flying or floating, and I'm just looking around at this cityscape around me. And I'm like, in these astral projection experiences, I like flying. It's pretty fun. And so I just remember flying forward, and next thing you know, like I was flying forward pretty casually, but then like my speed kept picking up and picking up and picking up, and next thing you know, light was just bending around me, around my eyes, and it seemed like I was just speeding through space. It was like some sort of a Star Trek warp speed. Um, and I'm just speeding through wherever. And after maybe literally 15 seconds, I stop. And now I'm in a completely different cityscape. It was almost like I was in that same cityscape, except now it must have been like 200, 300 years after some nuclear explosion happened, and ruins and grass and vines started covering the city. And it seemed pretty well uninhabited. And so I'm like, oh, I'm just going to start, explore this, just kind of fly around, see what's going on out here. And as I was flying over it, I saw two things. There were a couple of what looked like dogs skittering around through the city, and there was a man or a being that he was covered up in a cloak and wraps, so I couldn't see anything about him, but I just knew it was a man walking down the street. Um, and this is like a pretty well might have just broke the camel's back here. I attacked him. Something in my head said like he was evil. And I had this very sharp contrast in my mind about good versus evil. And so I thought from somewhere by trying to get rid of this person, I'm doing a good thing. And I ended up attacking this being, and he starts attacking me back. And the way you attack within this world is weird. I don't know how I conjured this up in my mind, but I like charged up like this sort of energy ball and just threw it at him, and he didn't like that, and so he starts doing the same to me. And it was this back and forth for a while now, probably for about 5 minutes. And I was like, okay, like I don't know what I'm doing. This isn't going anywhere. I need to get out of here. And I ended up like trying to shake myself to wake up. And I wake up and I'm looking around, and there were these three dogs like sitting at the foot of my bed. And there was this voice in my head that said, like, choose one of the dogs. It said, you won for beating this being. Choose one of the dogs. And I reach out to one of these dogs, and I can still remember it. As soon as I reached out to touch this dog, all of the dogs start climbing on me and start clawing at my skin. And they just had these really beady, devious eyes, like they wanted to consume me or devour me. And so I thought I was awake, halfway, but I was still within inside of a this world. And so I shook myself again and woke up from that. And so that experience was one that was pretty well. I think I really ticked something off in this other world. And yeah, and I can understand, right? If someone just randomly attacked me, I probably wouldn't be too happy about that. And so that was one experience, and then the other one was a bit more simple, but a bit more scary to me personally. I got out of my body. I was within inside of my apartment room, and I was going to just leave the room. Normally, I'll just leave the room and I'll walk out the door and just kind of walk around like the apartment complex. But as I opened my door to leave, this lady walks into the room, and she's dressed in all these white robes, and she's got blonde hair, and this light is emanating from her. And the first thought in my head is like, this is an angel, you know? Like this is an angel. This is something good about her. And So I sit back down on my bed and I'm just kind of like in awe. I'm like, what's going on right now? What is she doing here? And she reaches out her hand and I reach out my hand to touch her. And next thing you know, she almost dissolves into me. I feel this chill go down the back of my spine. And I woke up from there. After that, all the experiences went from me and my buddy just, flying around, exploring things like we're in the Goonies or something, to I'm constantly running into not positive beings, beings that yeah, I just call them negative entities is the easiest way, but in the Bible we know them as demons and evil spirits. Uh, so yeah, that was the start of that there, and yeah, it gets pretty wild.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
It's incredible that you're actually at a point where you're meeting these other spiritual entities in this astral realm, which is something that a lot of people actually describe. Having astral projected multiple times, they start to see other beings and they're able to interact with them, and so your experience like shares that commonality. Even though it's really remarkable what you'd been through, and it would have been absolutely terrifying. I could see why you got chills when you saw that entity like come into your body. And as a Christian, that's kind of really interesting. The idea that, you're opening yourself up to these beings spiritually, and then, you're having this experience where she enters you, right? Like that's pretty, that's pretty incredible. And so at that point, I'm assuming it was pretty terrifying, and it stopped being like this fun practice that you would do. What did you get into next? Like you mentioned before that you kind of became involved in the New Age movement. Did you sort of look to the New Age for answers to these experiences, or what was the next sort of step for you?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, shortly after it all went pretty south, and well, I'm like, well, I've got to figure out why this is going on. And at the time, the Bible's not even crossing my mind. But I'm like, well, this New Age information seems to be the only thing that talks about this stuff. So let me find out more about it. And yeah, you start reading forums where people will say they have these experiences with entities of this other world. At that time, I couldn't find anything that was necessarily saying a lot about negative entities. For one reason or another, maybe I wasn't researching hard enough. But I ended up getting into, so I got into meditation and I started just trying to realize what I was doing to cause these entities to be there and stop doing it. That's the brief way of saying it. But what was going on descriptively was I was finding myself not even trying to to astral projection or not even trying to have lucid dreams. I would just go to sleep, and in my dreams, I was automatically warped into this other world with these other beings. And I do remember having the thought at the time about the Bible. They were constantly berating me in ways which the Bible describes and which are sins. They were berating me in ways of uh, just anger, through fear, through lust. Those were the biggest things, and then just confusion. Truly, they were mixing me back and forth with truths. And so I just remember thinking to myself, like, okay, if I can just, if I'm getting tempted with anger, if I can just not be angry, then they'll go away. Or if I'm tempted with lust, if I can just not have any lust in me, they'll go away. And it was a big mistake. And I think a huge proponent of this all as well that I left out was that me and my buddy had got this concept of spirit guides, like these otherworldly beings that are there to the benevolent, they want the best for you. And one experience that I had before all this went south was I was laying in my bed, not trying to do anything, just gonna go to sleep. I woke up and above me there's this guy just floating above me, above my bed. And he's just talking away. And he must have been talking for the past 5 minutes, but only there at the end I became conscious. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he says, trans-dimensional travel. It's like, you're gonna have to explain that one. I don't know anything about that. Um, and he's like, come follow me. I ended up following this guy outside, and he says, things are gonna start getting a little bit tougher for here for you. Um, He says, but there's still a way, there's a way to get out. Just follow your heart, is what he says. Just listen to your heart. And I'm like, well, as long as I do that, I'll be okay. In hindsight, that's a trap of the devil, following your heart, trusting your instincts, trusting your intuition. It's a really crafty way of being the enemy and also being the what is that called in TV shows? Yeah, just playing both sides is essentially what they were doing. They gave me the problem. They tried to give me a way out, and which would only pull me deeper. And so I was relying on these spirit guides throughout this experience to try to help me out. And when I would get into these sticky situations within the dreams, I would just call in a spirit guide, call in someone to help me. And I found myself just inviting more and more and more things to where it just piled up. At one point, just being inside of this dream, there were probably like 30 or 40 entities sitting around. And they were just all looking at me and they were just laughing. They were just laughing and pointing at me. They're like, you don't know how bad we've got you. And, I'm 19 at the time. And yeah, I don't know what to make of it. The only thing I can tell myself is I'm pretty stubborn. And I'm like, oh, I'll figure this out soon, soon enough. Uh, that was when I was 19. I'm 18 now, so we're 28 now. So yeah, it's quite a bit later, and we're just now starting to figure out things. So it's yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy, brother. Like, what did that process look like for you when you did start to sort of figure out what was going on? Like, because I know eventually you obviously come to Christ. You were sort of like looking and obviously online New Age communities trying to understand what's going on with you. What's your experience been like, or recently, what's it been like sort of coming to Jesus and starting to unpack all these kind of things that you were involved in and these experiences that you've had? Has the Bible kind of given you language to use to describe these experiences? Like, uh, has it helped you to
Yeah,
understand what you've been through?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it just blows my mind because, yeah, like I said, I'm 28 now, so it's been 7 years that I've been within this new age movement, trying to figure out what's going on, and to just kind of give you perspective. 365 days out of the year, maybe 10 days a year, probably less, I would actually have a normal dream, maybe. Um, Throughout this entire time, I would constantly be berated and tormented by these beings in ways that I'm glad we have a mind that forgets things, because, I'd wake up just in panic. Whether it's, yeah, yeah, I mean, it gets deep. I think that the biggest thing was these beings telling you you're gonna die, you're gonna die. And that for the longest time, maybe for the first 4 or 5 years, that's because I'm pretty stubborn. I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna listen to these beings. They don't know what they're talking about. But after about 5 or 6 years, and this is still going on, and like I started having some health things come up. I'm like, oh, whoa, maybe this is it. And something interesting that these beings would do, because they have a bunch of motives. So that you've got Satan, and this is kind of what the Bible's helped me understand is, so there's Satan, right, the great deceiver, but he's not omnipresent like our God is. And so he has a hierarchy of these negative entities that he uses to do his work and do his bidding. And so each of, like I said, there's a hierarchy. So each of these entities, they have their own need and their own desire and their own will of what they want to do with you. I have journals throughout the past 7 years from most nights of what's been going on, and so I have a pretty good idea of how this hierarchy works. But one thing that was just completely um, that was a huge issue that would just gross me out was these beings. What they would do is they draw this energy from you. Um, they would grab me when I'm inside these dreams, and they'd suck this energy of this life force from me. And I could only explain it as that because when I'd wake up, I'd feel like just extremely tired and something that was just taken away from me. And when they take it away from you, they seem recharged, they seem energized. And when they look at you wanting this stuff, they're like these, you just look at their eyes and they're just void of all life. And all you just see is this primal sense of hunger. and this will of destruction. And they just want to tear into you, and they want what you have, because it seems like without it, they can't sustain themselves. And so that's just to kind of give a bit more touch onto what that was like. And so as I came into the Bible, thank God for just leading me into the Bible. Um, it's given me so much context to what's been going on. And in the back of my mind, I had some context. I'm like, these are, well, these entities are leading me on with these sins that are in the Bible, you know? So it's like, there's got to be some sort of correlation. But I grew up with a bit of reluctance towards the Bible, just skepticism, and just like, oh, that couldn't be true. You know what I'm saying? Like, uh, God, Jesus, all this stuff, it doesn't make sense. And then the more I got into this New Age stuff, I'm kind of having it in my head that all religions are the same and they're all good, and love is love, and God is, for everybody. But so I ended up getting into the Bible only because I went through all these New Age experiences, man. Buddhism, Hinduism, meditations, crystal work, healing work, energy work, all this stuff. And nothing is helping me. Nothing is helping me, man, through the course of 7 years. And so I can't get a good night's rest. I'm constantly getting tormented. Like I'm thinking I'm about to go crazy. Thank God. I always kind of say, like, I think of stubbornness as a gift sometimes, because if it wasn't for just that will I had to keep fighting, I just drive you crazy, right?
Totally.
So yeah, so the Bible, just getting into that. So I picked up the Bible just with a sense of reluctance. Like, I'm just going to see what this book is about. Nah, we're going to see what's up with this. You know what I'm saying? It talks about it, so maybe there's something to it. But once I just started reading, starting into the Gospels, I'm like, oh man, well, hmm, that's true. Like I agree with that. It's like, oh well, that's true as well. And then, the more I kept reading, the more I found out that every bit of apprehension that I had towards the Bible was just it was just I wasn't properly taught it as a kid. I wasn't taught the important stuff about the fact that Christ died for our sins and that he loves us and that we are in a spiritual warfare. Like that's become so evident to me over the past 7 years. And it's like, well, the Bible's talking about all of this stuff. And all these other religions or philosophies are saying love is love. And if you meditate for so long and let go of your desires, you'll reach nirvana. Or if you raise your vibration so much, you'll vibrate higher than these things. And it's no one's talking about the spiritual warfare and these entities that are constantly trying to devour us, and Satan constantly trying to devour us. And so the Bible just it just all started clicking, man. It was like just pieces falling together for me. And so yeah, thank God. It's been beautiful.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, I can't even imagine what you've been through on a nightly basis when you go to bed and you want nothing more than to rest after a hard day to be tormented. Like, you have my sympathy. Has it been easier for you since you've come to Christ? Like, and now that you've sort of understand that spiritual warfare and you sort of understand what's going on, have the experiences been easier? Have they sort of slowed down or stopped? Like, how's life for you now with Jesus?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they haven't stopped. And that's something that I couldn't really try to reconcile at first. It was like after I got baptized, I thought like that was it, like I'm done, I'm saved from this. Um, but I don't think that's the way God works, is, just because you have a problem and you get baptized and you get saved doesn't mean the devil stops trying to tempt you. It doesn't mean your problems go away automatically. And so that took me a while to kind of reconcile and just release it to the Lord. Like, hey, I can't make like a statement or a barter with God saying, hey, if you take this away, then I'll believe in you. I wish I could, but that's not how it works. And so over the past So I was baptized halfway into last year. So this was probably about 6, 7 months ago now. And just over the last few months, I've just been having like really interesting experiences with being in those same situations that I have been with these entities and being berated and taunted and just shown despicable things. And I've just been in these situations where I find myself praying. And in fact, I've got one situation that kind of highlights it all. I was locked inside this really small room with one of these entities, and he was close. And the interesting thing inside this world is that your senses are a bit heightened, and you can kind of sense the presence of something. Like if something feels wrong, you can feel that before you even have to look at it. And so that the presence of this entity was just extremely overwhelmingly negative, and you could feel that it just wanted to felt that I just wanted to tear into me and destroy me and said it's just yelling at me. It's telling me all these negative things. And the first thing that just clicked in my mind was to pray. And so I just kind of sit down and I start praying. And he's yapping away. He's like, "Oh, prayer's not gonna help you." Yeah, 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 yeah. And I just kept my mind on Jesus and started praying. And man, it was I just I probably prayed like 2 or 3 prayers, and like I think it was after as soon as I started like the second prayer, this white warm light just started surrounding me, and it was like this distance. I could still see that other entity, but it was like just this white light was just surrounding me and protecting me from. So all that energy, that negativity that I felt, it was no longer within inside this shield or bubble, if you will. And I just remember praying, and I just felt this deep seated feeling of just peace and gratitude, and just started tearing up, man. So by the time my third prayer wasn't even a prayer for it to stop, it was just a prayer just saying, "Lord, thank you for your protection, thank you for your light." And just yeah, that and I've had a good amount of those experiences to where I get into prayer and it just blows me away, man. It just blows me away, especially like going through this for the past 7 years without any reprieve. And then Christ still with me throughout the entire way and and calls me in and is there for me. It's just the sweetest thing. Um, yeah, man, it's been beautiful. It's been beautiful. So even though these things go on, and it's still something that I'm trying to like wrap my head around. Like, why does the Lord have me here? Um, I'm not sure what benefit it is for me to be constantly, attacked by these things. And it's a weird thing dealing with this as well because we have enough problems and things to take on in our daily life. And so it's like I've got this stuff in my daily life, and then I go to sleep and I've got all this other stuff. Then it's like when I wake up, well, I've got to think about work and bills and all this other, and so, but just bringing my heart and my mind to Christ is just giving me that peace of he's got me. There's nothing that they can do to me that will take me away from him. And so that's man, I've had just experiences with being in there and just praying and just weeping, man. Inside of these dreams, just find myself just like I've never in my entire life just weeping. Like I'll call upon Christ and my spirit will just weep just with unworthiness and just gratitude, and there's just nothing like it. And so yeah, that's been beautiful, man. That's been beautiful.
Yeah, man, I really like what you said. Well, firstly, thanks for sharing all that and for your vulnerability. I really like what you said about how when we come to Christ, it's not just like all of our problems go away, right? Like, otherwise, everyone would be coming to Jesus if he just fixed absolutely every issue you had so that you had this perfect life. That's not what we see happening to people in the Bible either. And so I can definitely relate to that. And I think it's good because, sometimes with podcasts like this, people do have a story where they come to Christ and a lot of things fall into place, but then it sets up this false expectation for people listening that if they turn their lives over to Jesus, that everything's going to be perfect for them. And then if that
Mm,
doesn't happen, they think they're doing something wrong. When sometimes
right.
God, in his sovereignty allows us to go through trials. Like, that's happened to me, certainly it's happening to you. So that makes a lot of sense, brother. And just as sort of as we come to a close here, I have one more question for you. I wanted to
Yeah.
know, what would you say to somebody who's in a position like you were before, where they're starting to get into these practices? Maybe they're getting into astral projection, lucid dreaming. What would you say to somebody like that? Do you have any warnings or any advice to them?
Yeah. I mean, the absolute warning is to not do it. Um, Absolutely don't do it. I've had friends that I'll tell these experiences to, and I had to stop doing it because from some of my secular friends, they would it would just interest them. It's like, oh well, I want to try it. How do you do it? And I'm like, no, like that's no, not at all. You don't want anything to do with this. For people that are getting into it, I think a reason why I got into it was because it was transcendent and it has this sense of newness and novelty. And I think about it in the sense that um, the life that we live in this modern world, especially in America, but just across the world, we live in a very disenchanted world, and to where everything is very bland, and it just leaves you. A part of you knows that there's more. Part of all of us knows that there's more going on, and so it leaves you wanting more, which is, I believe, just another trap of the devil, taking us away from the 300, 400 years ago. Something that we say in my Bible study is like it would be very hard to not believe in God 300, 400 years ago. The way culture was set up, it was a very common thing. Like we spoke about before, it was very common for people to have these spiritual experiences. Or, even in the Bible, people being possessed by demons or having these visions and having all this stuff where nowadays everything is science. Um, and so we live in this very disenchanted world. So a reason I got into it was this enchantment. So my warning for you would be just don't do it, man. Like there's nothing that you're gonna find there. A lot of my friends will say, "Hey, maybe if I did it and I saw that world, I would just believe in God." It's like, no, that's not how it works because you can and still end up believing in all this other stuff, like I did for 7 years. Um, there is more than enough enchantment and abundance of life in the Gospels and in Christ, more than you could even imagine. Um, and so I would just say stay away from that. The one thing I feel like I can take from that is now I know for a fact that there is a spiritual existence outside of this world. Now I know for a fact that there is a spiritual warfare going on. Like you couldn't tell me otherwise. You couldn't try to argue it. Like I've seen it, unfortunately, for thousands and thousands of nights. And so that's one thing that I can take from it, that I feel like is a gift out of this entire really bad situation is that it is real. And so having that, you have to ask yourself, okay, amongst all these religions and philosophies, what's true? And what I've been led to and what I believe and what all the evidence points to is Jesus Christ is Lord, and this is the Son of God and died for our sins. And that's what brought me to that mentally and logically. But the walk with him has just convicted me so much more in ways that just 3 months ago, yeah, just couldn't even imagine, and it all started with the prayer. And so if you're going through this stuff and you're getting into it and you want to know more about this life that we live in, pray, pray to God, pray to Jesus, ask for a relationship with him. You don't have to know it all. Pick up the Bible, start reading. There's so much more that I'd have to tell you about this. So many experiences that I had that I couldn't say enough words to convey the depth of darkness that has been surrounding me and been attacking me, and has successfully, a lot of the times, attacked me. And to come from that to find this peace and find this grace and being, experiencing it is just been a blessing. So yeah, don't do it. Don't do it.
Perfect place to end there. Thank you so much, brother, and thank you everybody for watching. If you liked Lamont's testimony, it helps us out a lot. If you like and subscribe, it helps share his story to far more people, which is why we always ask that you do that. Um, Lamont, I think we'll stop the recording there, brother. But thank you again so much for your time, and yeah, shout out to Nate for bringing us together.